let's think about it now, back to God created us in his image. And in Thessalonians we see Christians have body, soul, and spirit. So if human beings are created that way, I want to get you to consider one thing. How do we interact with the physical world? Okay? Our soul has no contact with the physical world. Even our brain, which is part of our body, our brain, has no contact with the physical world. It's stuck in a shell of bone, right? We get our interface to the physical world is through our senses. So our eyes convert light waves into electrical signals that go back into our brain. Our optical nerve converts those into images. And our brain resolves those images into something that inside of our head we can see. Okay? So and you can lose your sight because of a lot of things. If your eye doesn't work right, if your optical nerve isn't right, if the signal that goes back to your brain doesn't work, if the part of your brain that receives that signal doesn't work, if the part of your brain that interprets what that signal means doesn't work, any of those things along that path will make you blind. And if you're blind, you have no awareness of the visual world. If you were born blind, you've never had an awareness of the visual world. Okay? The same thing is true with our ability to hear. We receive sound waves into our ear, it causes vibration, that's converted to electrical signal, which goes into our brain interprets that, and says, this is what I hear. Some people can hear higher frequencies, and some people can hear lower frequencies. There's lots of frequencies that we can't even hear, that are outside of the ability of our ear to even process. And we have the same kind of path from our physical ear, all back to our nervous system, into our brain, that takes those signals and creates something that another part of our brain interprets into sound. Okay, so you can look at this and you say, okay, so our brain is a physical thing, and our mind is the part of our soul which interacts with the brain. And so our mind is, one way, it's not a perfect way, but analogy, our mind is like the computer operator, and our brain is like the computers, and our nervous system is like the camera and the mouse and all the other things that's passing signals in. Okay, it's not a perfect analogy, but just a way to think about it. So you're getting all these signals in, it's coming into the computer, and then we're sitting there looking at the computer, and we're interacting with that to get that information. So you can kind of think of the way our mind works, our soul works, is similar. Our brain is doing all this processing, but our soul is understanding it. And some people say, well, there's no difference. I mean, your brain is all there is. Well, tell that to the guy who's brain dead and can describe everything that happened in the operating room after his brain stopped working. Okay? Because we have instances of people who, through their soul, were able to continue on with their observation for a limited time. Continue on using the information that came through their nervous system even though their brain stopped. Their soul could still pull that information out for a while. So we can look at the way we have an interface into the physical realm through our body and through our senses. Suppose that you had an interface into the spiritual world through your human spirit. That your soul was at the intersection of the physical world and the spiritual world. And so the way we understand the physical world is through our body. Our bodies pass the information in, and our soul collects that information and correlates it and makes sense out of it. In the same way, our spirit is collecting information from the spirit realm. And as it pulls that information in, it collects it, and our soul takes that and makes sense of it. So if this is true, if what we read in 1 Thessalonians 5:23 is true, that we're supposed to be body, soul, and spirit, then the human being operating in that way is made and created to get information from both of these realms, from both of these realities, and correlate them together in a soul. So how was it that when God was walking in the Garden of Eden with humans, that it was natural for them just to talk to him? Because they were collecting information about God through their spiritual senses, the same way they were collecting information about what a flower smells like and what a tree looks like through their physical senses. And all that information was being correlated. So it was as natural for them to walk in the garden and feel grass as it was to walk in the garden and sense God spiritually. Their sensation in the spirit realm and the physical realm was all working It was all bringing the information, and it was all being correlated in their soul. So, for us, we would go, it's unnatural. We can't experience a spiritual being like that. But for Adam and Eve, it was perfectly natural. They were literally created to do that. They were created to operate in both the physical realm and the spiritual realm simultaneously. And their soul is like the intersection of those two realms. So you can think of the spirit realm as a spiritual dimension, as another dimension in space and time, and the physical realm as having its dimensions. And here's our soul in the middle, collecting the data, correlating it all, understanding it all, and being able to interface back and communicate back in both realms. Now, we take data from the physical realm, we communicate back in the physical realm. We don't, it takes a lot of science to understand all the particulars of that. But it's natural for us, right? We don't think about, okay, I'm now getting light waves and they're going in my brain, it's stimulating things, and now I'm going to speak and respond to that. We don't even think about that stuff. Praying in the spiritual realm is the same, but hearing and seeing, to the point where we were created, think of it this way, we were created to have this reaction to God in the spirit realm, just as we are able to communicate or respond to another being, an animal or a plant or another being in the physical.